Hello everyone, welcome to Ranting Politics. This is part 1 of Donald Barr's Space Relations. Naked, wincing, waiting, John Craig lay on his back on the cold examination table. His knees raised, his feet on either side of the big pedals, his hands palm up beside him, in a thicket. No, it was a Gorgon's chevelure of wires. Green wires, white wires, cerise wires, black wires, yellow wires. Wires leading from probes tamped into every orifice of his body, from electrodes sucking at his pallid skin in 31 places, from catheters threaded along 4 arteries and 2 veins, to a sleek gray cabinet, the terminal. "Medusa loves me, hardening my flesh," Craig quoted in a mumble around 2 fat white wires. He gagged. 4 kilometers away, in Bethesda, the health executive's North American computer retrieved the 38-year record of John Craig's physiology. Back to back with the gray, a large blue cabinet rattled briefly, and, like an idiot, belching and sticking out his tongue, pushed forth several inches of paper. MD8 Krause, scuttling back and forth in the traditional white smock of his guild, glanced at the paper, checked the anal and urethral probes with a plastic-gloved finger. "Son of a bitch," mumbled Craig, as Krause said heartily, "We're on the line. Relax, John." Peeling off the plastic glove, slid a brace of plump gray earphones over Craig's damp, sandy hair and a single white one over his own white bristles, ran a thumb over the soft inside of Craig's left forearm and peered with a half smile at the MS43985 neatly branded there, keyed digits into the PSB on the cabinet, and pressed the blue Start Program button. "Oh, I'm wholly relaxed," mumbled Craig. "Breathe in," said the earphones in a warm female voice. "Hold your breath. Release your breath. Breathe naturally. In, out, in. Expel all your breath. Force it out. Stop breathing. Breathe naturally. Place your feet on the pedals. Begin pedaling." The LHVM series lasted 4 minutes. Krause pressed the green Continue Program button. "You will now experience," said the warm female voice, "a series of mild stimuli from some of the electrodes on your skin. Please do not be alarmed. They will be very mild, like a momentary tickling. Please do not try to suppress your reactions. Please do not scratch or try to remove the electrodes." The NRN series was, as promised, like being teased with a huge invisible feather. It lasted a minute and a half. When it was over, Craig raised his eyes expectantly to Krause, but the physician shook his head, held up a warning hand, turned to the gray cabinet, keyed 4 digits into the PSB, pressed the blue Start Program button, and turned back again with a countenance totally blank of expression. Craig's eyes narrowed. A new voice in the earphones, a metallic tenor, instantly recognizable as synthesized speech of 4 or 5 parameters at best, said, "I am going to pronounce some ordinary words. Listen, but do not reply. Simply remain relaxed. Close your eyes if it helps you to relax. Now please pay attention. Duty." A pause of 2 seconds. "Average." Pause. "Cut." "Protect." "Eat." "Shame." "Leisure." "Warm." "Exquisite." "Control." "Pink." "Nighttime." "Teeth." "Essence." "Relief." "Wild." The robot voice intoned 40 words and then said, "Thank you for listening." Krause busied himself with the PSB for a moment. The blue cabinet whirred, belched twice, and vomited paper. The physician waited a few moments after the seizure was over, pulled the long printout loose, and studied it, chewing his upper lip. "You are a crafty old quack, aren't you?" mumbled Craig, and gagged. "Crafty enough to winkle what I want to out of the likes of you," said Krause equably. "I have everything we need. Let's disconnect you." The buzzer sounded on a wall vidiphone at the other side of the room. "Sorry, John," said Krause. "Just let me get rid of this." He hurried to the phone and thumbed the switch. A young man in medical white looked anxiously out of the screen and said, "Krause? Frederick, MD8? "Yes," said Krause. The young man held something outside Vidicam range and compared it with Krause. "All right. Go to July code 5Z, please." Abruptly, the image eddied into streaks. Krause pulled a flimsy from his smock pocket, peered at it, and punched a sequence into the keyboard. The young man in white reappeared. "Walters, Carl, HT4, at Bethesda," he said. "Is that your patient on the table, sir? The one you had online?" "Yes. Craig John Armbruster, CDE16, MID NA 111226257. "Right, sir. Well, I have to report a tap. That is, an attempt to tap his examination, somewhere." "Somewhere?" "Yes, sir." "Remarkable. Right in good old somewhere. Not here in Bethesda, I mean." "You say attempt," snapped Krause. "Was it successful?" "We don't know, sir. It could have been. Depends on who or whether." Krause glanced over his shoulder at Craig. Craig grinned mirthlessly. Krause said, "You mean, young man, it depends on whether this was a government tap." "Yes, sir." "And if it was probably successful." "Yes, sir." "Well, my young friend," said the physician firmly, "you may as well forget the matter. What's a little snooping between friends? That is a point of view, sir. That's precisely what it is. My patient has nothing to hide, etc. Put it out of your mind, HT4 Walters." "Yes, sir." "Let your natural optimism have full scope." "Yes, sir." "Expand the ventral and contract the dorsal aspects of your frame, as the great Dr. James said." "Yes, sir." Krause blinked the screen and swore. He came back to Craig and stood looking down at him. Craig smiled. The physician said, "All right, let's unhook you." The catheter's out, the blood vessels sealed, the skin patched with dermaton, throat, nostrils, ears, arms, and urethra cleared, and the 31 electrodes abruptly weaned. John Craig scrubbed the contact paste off his body with aromatic tissue and began to put on his clothes. MD8 Krause sat on the examination table, swinging his short legs and studying the printout. "What's it all about, John?" he asked without looking up. "Could be almost anybody." "In other words, you won't tell me." "In other words, I honestly don't know. Fritz, it could be my own shot. Perhaps they're worried about me. Perhaps they think I can't handle this mission to Cosar." "Perhaps you can't." Craig ignored that. "Or it could be somebody working for the Plith. Or somebody working for Kossar. Or perhaps it's my erstwhile friends, the Merry Liberals. They control OIP and most of ETS, and they have plenty of people in Justice. They sure as hell don't want me going on this trip." "I'm not sure I want you going on this trip." Krause produced a pen and ticked off 2 lines of the printout, hesitated, then ticked off 2 more. "Oh, that reminds me." Fritz, you devious old charlatan," said Craig. "Where did that last little series come from?" "The words?" "The words." "I thought you'd like them. They're rather neo-Freudian." "I noticed." "It's not a new idea, but it's just recently becoming available to us little quacks out in the field. Up to now, all we had for 200 years was the word association test Jung designed for Freud. You know, knife, fork, beauty, beast. 200 years. It tells something, if the doctor has lived with his patient a long time. Otherwise, it tests the doctor. The patient is the inkblot. The doctor is the patient. Of course, various characters tried to mechanize it. Very crude stuff, mixed up with polygraphy and the like." Krause waved a hand. "But all the hardware could do you see, was to detect gross changes in, well, general effect. No specificity as to effect cluster. Subject heard knife. It excited him. But where did it get to him? Here?" Krause clapped his hand on his crotch. "Castration anxiety? Or what? You know that shrinking feeling? At least the old word test sometimes gave us a clue. Now you see." "I see." Craig turned a hard, bright gaze on the physician. "But what do you see, Fritz?" "I see a boy with a problem." Have you ever seen a boy without a problem? Stop fending it off, said Krause sharply. He consulted the printout and spoke without raising his eyes. Yesterday's blood was good. No cancers, thyroid fine, parathyroid's fine. You have good endocrines. The spinal amino acid balances were, well, there were no anomalies. No psychosis in the near future. Sperm count in an excellent range. Motility, etc., likewise. Lungs fine, heart fine. Vascular system still fine. Macrometabolic processes fine. Very efficient for an ex-fatso. Nerves anatomically sound. Primary and secondary reflexes all right, especially the primary. Neuroanalogies in the normal range. Differentiation adequate. Resolution good and quick. Impedance is a bit high in the genital and rectal clusters. He paused. Good heavens, said Craig. I'm going to Cosar to negotiate a treaty, not... Be still. And, the physician looked up, this brings us to a certain sense I have. John, I intuit something wrong. I was an engineer before I became a charlatan. Did you know that? And there was something in John Armbruster Craig that's out of whack. Each system is fine, but there is something, well, not aesthetic about the way they work together. Diverted energies, binding energy, compensating for some kind of functional strain? I think so. Now we come to the 40 words. You noticed, didn't you, that many of them were ambiguous? Duty, for instance, a childish term for feces, also refers to superego constraint, as well as to a military assignment. Eat is an interesting word, isn't it, John? So is pink, apparently. Something pink has been heavily cathected here. And this is at the adult level. You do not have a castration anxiety in the ordinary sense, no marked signs of it with cut. On the other hand, with teeth. I've your attention now, do I? You do, said Craig evenly. 8 years ago, before you went to the Betelgeuse conference, you were a nice, soft young man, brighter than most, but normal, depressingly normal. It's all here as a baseline. He flapped the printout. At the conference, you were able. Everyone said so. But no one said you were brilliant. Not brilliant, no. Then, coming home, you had your experience. I know what you told your department. And that's all I know. And not even the prigs of the extraterrestrial service think you told them the whole story. The real story. 2 years as a slave in the mines of... wherever it was. Tregast. A melodramatic name. This Kossar seems to be a melodramatic place. I looked it up last night. Settled by the Carlyle Society. The idea of exiling political extremists to the stars was asinine to begin with. Anyone with any historical sense should have seen what would happen. Humane, but asinine. And what a ripe lot the Carlyle Society were. Sociology was a Gothic tale. Now we've had 5 generations of inbred schizoid popinjays. Delightful. Kossar. Whatever happened to you there, it changed you. Changed utterly, as the poet says. A terrible beauty is born. I noticed that you are fingering your left arm. You come home, oh, a very sick young fellow. All sorts of sick. I remember that printout. Organically, you've recovered. Slowly. Be reasonable, Fritz. I've done well. You've done brilliantly. The whole MIPTO development is your baby. Everyone says so. You're in line for secretary. Everyone says so. Even liberals. That, do you see, is the point. Your brilliancy. Your brilliancy is like a symptom. It is the symptom. Not that I ever see any of it around here, he added as an afterthought. But I hear about it, and some other things. Speaking of poetry, let me fetch something. Excuse me. He scuttled out of the room, returned with 3 thin volumes bound in cloth-covered cellulose boards in precious mimicry of the 19th century, waved them at Craig with a smile, leafed through one, and began to read. All that in April happens in the earth happens in me when your hand touches me. Craig nodded. That sonnet, if you will remember, is from your first volume, 11 years ago. Pretty, very pretty. We shall designate that before. Now as to after. Where's that thing you were quoting on the table? Ah, here. Medusa loves me, hardening my flesh. She salts my dying childhood with her fury. Also very pretty, but in a different vein, am I right? A somewhat different vein. The Medusa sonnets are, didn't someone call them, Faisand? I did, said Craig. Then you agree with me. And it isn't only the Medusa sonnets. Here's a later effusion of yours. My goodness. He wagged his head over it. I particularly like the ending. The snowy serviette, the dainty hand, and Hansel screaming in the even teeth. John, why must you go to Cosar? You say you spent 2 years as a slave on Kossar, yet for some reason you pushed to bring Kossar into MIPTO, even though the Man-Inhabited Planets Treaty has a clause against alliances with slave-owning societies. You wrote the clause. Of course, you were the darling of the liberals then. And now, Craig interrupted calmly, Fritz, take it from me. Earth needs Kossar in the treaty organization. I can't tell you precisely why, but... Oh, I know why, John. I know how scared you all are of the Plith. Aren't you scared of the Plith, Fritz? Of course. I'm a liberal. But unlike many of my party, you see, I admit that, I don't like ant-empires any more than I like people-empires. Very well, then. Let's assume Earth needs Kossar in the treaty organization. Can't someone else represent Earth at the signing? Why can't the secretary do it? Why can't I? Because, said Krause slowly, because I'm truly afraid of what might happen to you. You're holding yourself together by an unconscious effort. What if the binding energy fails? I have to go. Whom would you send instead, Fritz? A doddering old narcissist who thinks himself a master of realpolitik and would sell off Klaus 18? That anti-slavery Klaus you think so highly of? Might you be describing your distinguished superior? Yes, the secretary. Or maybe you'd send a hand-wringing missionary from the tall corn who would scold naughty little Kossar and abolish its slavery. I recognize the leader of my party. But, John, isn't that the idea? To abolish slavery? No. My idea is to abolish slaves and slave owners. Oh? Is that different? Yes, it's different. Craig glared at the MD8 but seemed not to see him. You can't just abolish the master-slave relation. You have to put some other relation in its place. When I got home from Kossar, I was angry. I wanted to go up to Kossar with an army at my back and abolish slavery. It wouldn't have abolished slavery in me. But I didn't think that mattered, not then. And when I wrote Klaus 18, I was still angry. It took me a long time to learn from my own sickness. I know a little about slave owners, too. No one forces them to be cruel. We're all liberals, you know. We like to think institutions distort people, but slavery is a frightful institution because it doesn't. It allows the most direct and unrestrained expression of human nature, Fritz. Believe me, when I was first captured on the way back from Betelgeuse, it flashed through my mind that my only chance to survive was to tell little lies, pick little fights, play little tricks, provoke little punishments. Every lie they believe is a victory. Every punishment that doesn't kill you is a victory. The word is Weissenheimer. Beware the separate piece. Accommodate and you're done for. And it gets harder and harder and harder not to accommodate, especially if... He broke off and seemed suddenly to focus on the man he was talking to. No, Fritz, I have to go. For the sake of my health. Krause's eyebrows lifted. I have unfinished business on Kossar, said Craig. In other words, said Krause, you want to get back to the delicacy. Craig, shortly, yes. Krause. Who is the remarkable lady? No one you know, Fritz. I know her slightly. Amaut intelligent. Which means, Craig, I love in order that I may understand. You try to do it backwards, and you never make it. I'm a trad, you're a prog. Drivel, John, drivel, drivel, drivel. Ideologized drivel. If you're so sure of these things, why do you say them in dead languages? To remind myself that such things have been said before and doubted before, and also that the men who said them are dead. That keeps me honest, instead of sincere. Krause. This is all very sententious, but does you no good whatever. Craig smiled thinly. I'm telling you as unbrilliantly as I can. I was made sick on Kossar, and on Kossar I can be made well. Perhaps. Don't try to cure yourself, John. I know these self-arranged abreactions. Get help. If you don't want mine, I can refer you. Thank you for pleading with me, Fritz, but no. I won't sign your medical release for this mission, John. Yes, you will, Fritz. I'd give anything to be that nice, plump, mediocre John Craig again. Anything at all. I don't like this new one. And you're going to help me. You're going to sign off on that form. Yes, you are, goddamn you. This concludes part 1 of Space Relations by Donald Barr. Just as a little side note, I would just like to say, yeah, this is very difficult to read just because of how poorly written it is. So many run-on sentences, so many really badly made dialogue. I can't even speak now just because of how challenging that was just to say in a flowy way, but hopefully I did a good enough job, and hopefully I'll get started on part 2 sometime next week. Take care, everyone. Have a nice day. This is Ranting Politics.